Thank you very much to all the organizers of this workshop and to the assistants to this conference. It's a pleasure to be here. I know some of you colleagues and friends. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So I have prepared a talk which I hope will be mainly useful for you. I'd like to use this time for sharing ideas, for showing to you some of the work that I have done, some of the works I am currently working on, in order to engage in a conversation with you that we can continue afterwards. Well, the main objective of my talk is to explain to you two projects. One is already done, the other one is in course, in which there is the idea of digital creating, in the sense of bringing together different actors, different discourses, different modes of representations, in which the idea of plurality, heterogeneity, experimentation, and collaboration are key. I will base my talk into three main concepts. The first one, as Anya was saying, is the concept of eclectic assemblage. I will then give you the reference of an article that I've wrote in which this theoretical concept is developed. And the idea of the eclectic assemblage has to do with this idea of bringing together a plurality of different items that complement each other in critical and innovative ways. Eclectic assemblage, eclecticism has to do with heterogeneity, with the idea of plurality, of difference, actually, with the production of differentiation. And assemblage has to do with this idea of a kind of bricolage, of bringing together, of building up something. For example, eclectic assemblage has to do with this idea of outcome, which is an important term in the domain of multimodal anthropology. You know that once upon a time, anthropologists used to be either textual, that was the regular term, either visual. There were those who were doing images, those who were doing text, but actually we can conceive a project as a research, an adventure in a way, which gives birth to a plurality of outcomes, different exhibitions, books, articles, films, and these films and this constitute a kind of constellation, and they don't have to be coherent as a whole. I mean, when you watch a movie, that it can lead you to criticize the book. When you read articles, that can enrich your experience with an exhibition. So we can think in a kind of constellation, which each point defines and complements others. But also eclectic assemblage has to do with people, with bringing different actors together. And this is something very important in the domain of curating. When we talk about curating, we are not just thinking on putting into a form a predetermined, a pre-made project. Curating has to do with creating a kind of narrative of narratives, a discourse of discourses, of bringing together pieces of discourses and creating a kind of narrative out of all them. This is for the idea of eclectic assemblage. It can be also about methods, the kind of method that we use. This is the first term. Then there is another term which is important and that I would like to develop in this talk, which has to do with the idea of outcome. I mean, outcome is an important term within multimodal anthropology, as you all know. Once upon a time, again, the idea was that we did research, we did field work, we wrote, and finally, by the end of the project, the PhD, the investigation, we had the outcome, the book, the monography, and the outcome came at the very last moment, and it was a kind of black box finished thing. But I mean, this idea of outcome is very old-fashioned, and if we think the idea of the provisory outcome, the idea of an ongoing research, that outcomes not as something that comes at the very end, but something that comes throughout the research itself, and that is open to conversation and collaboration. Then we have to think on how to present them. But if we think an intensive approach on the idea of outcome. When I say intensive, I think because it's an ongoing, because it's being done, because it's in the way, I think that outcome becomes a much more interesting category. For example, in the history of art, I mean, historians of art, they adore the kind of sketches and attempts made during the elaboration of a painting, because these give them the possibility of seeing how this painting has been made. So it's an intensive approach. Something similar could be done in the domain of anthropology. Am I being clear? Is everything all right? Yeah. Okay. And so eclectic assemblage is the idea of the provisory result as a kind of intensive category and not as an ending point. And then another category, which is also developed in a text. I'm going to share my screen to show you some of these materials, which is the idea of, I use the term homology. So it's a kind of coherence or matching of forms to refer to how we study what we study. And I'll try to make myself clear in this sense. I published an article studying images through images. So the idea is that if you want to study visual culture, the role of images in society, how they function, how we interact with and through them, it is rather a paradox not to use visual methods for it. Because, I mean, images has to be studied through images as well. So there has to be an homology, a kind of coherence between the nature of what we study and the way we study it. In a way, sometimes we said, okay, social life is messy, social life is changing, people invent, people are creative, whatever. So then we have to imagine methods that are in a way that mirror the very nature of the reality that we wish to study. So for example, now I am doing a research that I'm going to describe to you in a moment about what is a false image. What is a false image? I mean, anthropologists have been very interested in truth since ever, no? What people think, what people do, I mean, the truth. But I mean, the false is everywhere, okay? So now I'm thinking, and it's just the beginning of this project, so in methods to study the false. So, and which may be in a kind of homology or continuity with the very nature of what I'm studying right now, using false images, making false ethnographic films, something like this, playing ironically with the idea of the false. You see what I mean? So this idea of the homology between what we study and the way we study, there has to be a kind of continuity between what usually used to be the object of a study and the method that we use to study it. So for example, drawing is good in this regard, no? Because I, for example, studied, I will show you in the a divinity that was imagined, that represented in the very different ways. So for example, if you use drawing and you ask people to imagine the very nature of this divinity, who is represented differently every time, you are studying creativity and imagination, but you're using a method that sparks creativity and imagination instead of closing it down. Well, these three main principles, the idea of an eclectic assemblage, to make films, texts, ideas, to bring different plurality together, not to try to reduce heterogeneity in the kind of abstract coherence, the idea of using the outcome not as a kind of final arrival, final point, but also in this idea of an intensive idea of outcome, and then this idea of homology, you know, of how we study what we study and how we do it collaboratively, of course, is what has guided more or less the two research that I would like to share with you. Some of you knows at least one of these researches, but I hope that anyway, the talk will be interesting for you. Can you see my my presentation? I mean, my screen right now? Okay, that's fantastic. Well, the first research that I would like to show to you is a long-term research that I made on a Afro-American religion, which is called the cult to Maria Leonza. Maria Leonza is a divinity originally from Venezuela, and who is represented in very different ways, as a Black woman, as an Indian woman, as a mixed race, mestiza woman, and as an Indian woman as well. So there's a plurality in terms of representation. More interestingly, Maria Leonza is, her images are constantly reinvented. So you see artists, craftsmen, artists doing experimental films, I don't know, even in theater. So the image of Maria Leonza, as I said in an article, is always, I said, an intensive image, and in the sense of an image open to a permanent process of differentiation. New images of the goddess appear all the time. So what I studied is the way people represent Maria Leonza, the function of these images that we find in the religious domain, but also in the art, but also in advertising, on internet, in different places, and the role these images play in rituals and in other spaces, okay? Both in Venezuela and in Barcelona, my native city. So, and I finished this research, and I would like to show you, and then I made this website with a designer, and this is an important point as well when we do things like this. I mean, I'm not particularly skilled in these things. I like filming, but I mean, technological things makes me very nervous. So we have to be able to transmit the ideas, and this idea of homology is very important. It has been theoretized in ethnographic cinema, the fact that the editor and the filmmaker had to have this idea of a kind of similar approach or complicity. But I mean, this idea of the editor is too short right now. We have to talk with designers, with programmers, and then we have to make this effort of explaining how to turn an anthropological idea into a design of the website. If Maria Leonza is changing all the time, if images are false or true depending on the kind of social relationship that we establish with them, how can we transmit it, visualize it? How can we use, for example, the design of a website, not only as a way of representing what we know, but to think over it as a way of research, the very crafting of the website as a device for sparking anthropological research and for arriving to a point, for having a set of ideas that we couldn't have had otherwise. This is more or less, I think, what really interests me when doing these kinds of things. So this, I used to have a website. This website is a website in which I have just gathered all the material about this research. So here you see Maria Leonza as an Indian woman reading a paper and holding a pelvis on their hands, on her hands, sorry. So in this website, I put all the materials that I've published and done about this religion during 15 years of research, for example, radio programs, a book, which is available about and which is based on the concept of visual creativity that will be published in Spanish soon, articles, book chapters, it's all here. And there is also this idea of that, I mean, text complements I mean, films complements photographs, and this idea of the eclectic assemblage that I was explaining. By the way, this notion of eclectic assemblage, as well as the idea of homology that I presented, the idea that there has to be this kind of homology between what we study and the way we study it, is developed in this article, which is called Studying Multimodal Religions, Migration and Mediation in the Cult of Maria Leonza, which is published in the Visual Anthropology Review. I will send all the links of my presentation to the conveners of this panel, if it's fine for you, so you can forward it if anyone is interested. Of course, I'm totally available. I'm happy to respond to an email but if you wish, so they will have all the material. And the idea of research as an eclectic assemblage actually is the name of a chapter in this book by Stephen Spencer, Visual Research Methods in the Social Sciences, Awakening Visions, which has recently been republished in the second edition. Is a book that I do recommend very intensively. Anyway, let's come back to the project on Maria Leonza. So this project gave birth to books, to articles, and to a set of different films that I put here in open access. For example, one of these films, The Many Faces of a Venezuelan Goddess, was made in 2007 in Venezuela, and then thanks to the Venogrand Foundation, I could make the second part of the film 10 years later, which is actually about the practice of this film in Barcelona. And I think that is interesting as well, because is the way that, in a way, this film is, okay, these are Catalan anthropologists that went to the other part of the world to see something that actually was happening, was being practiced in his own city, but he decided to go very, very far away. And actually the second film is about a kind of anthropology in first person, and in a way bringing also in the film more voices, more authorship than in the first one. And then, which is interesting, is that I also made an exhibition about this. So it was a promise, that field work has an ethical stance, because we engage into a conversation, and we have to be, and most of the artists I was working with was saying, well, I would like to see my paintings in Barcelona. And I thought it was important. And I think the part of the multimodal approach has to do with public anthropology, with making the films that we made, sometimes with public money from public programs, available to a large audience. And this is part of the eclectic assemblage as well that I'm saying: photograph, films, websites, exhibitions. So I created an exhibition in Barcelona about Maria Leonza. It was in the midst of the pandemic, so it wasn't easy. And actually we had to increase the online aspect, because no paintings, sculptures, or whatever could be sent from Venezuela to Barcelona. So I had to contact all the believers that I knew in Europe to gather some of their statues, and then to use online. To say, for example, I asked some of these believers to send me images by Facebook, Twitter, of their own altars, which actually was very interesting, and which permitted me to see how the cult was being adapted to the situation of the pandemic. So this is an important way, again, an important idea again. And when we do organize an exhibition, it should go beyond the representational paradigm. It's not that we make a research and then we do the exhibition, but the very fact of organizing it, even though if it's a small one like this one, is part of the exhibition and the research itself. And actually it sparks a new conversations and new ideas. If it's fine for you, there is a very short clip of 2 minutes in which I explain with English subtitles how this exhibition was conceived. So I'm going to launch it, and then I will go to the second example and finish my intervention for you to comment on it, if you wish.
Benvinguts i benvingudes a l'exposició Maria Leonza, una deessa en moviment. Qui és Maria Leonza? Maria Leonza és una divinitat d'origen veneçolà, imaginada i representada de maneres molt diferents, sobretot de dues maneres, com una índia nua cavalcant un tapir i com una reina de pell blanca o mestissa. Maria Leonza és acompanyada per una gran quantitat d'esperits que conformen el seu panteó espiritual. D'on ve el culte a Maria Leonza? El culte a Maria Leonza es forma a Veneçuela a partir de l'encontre entre la tradició indígena, africana i europea. I hem volgut mostrar aquesta diversitat de maneres diferents. Per exemple, invitant els creients a enviar-nos fotos dels seus rituals o recuperant algunes de les imatges que els creients pengen a les xarxes socials. En aquestes imatges el que veiem és que el culte a Maria Leonza es caracteritza per una gran creativitat visual. Els creients reinventen, reimaginen la imatge de la divinitat una vegada i altra. Això no només passa en l'àmbit de la religió, sinó també en l'àmbit de l'art, com hem mostrat en aquesta secció de l'exposició, on tenim reproduccions de quadres i alhora algunes obres originals. Hem parlat de religió, hem parlat d'art, però també podríem parlar, per exemple, de còmic. I és que la Maria Llonze, la imatge de Maria Llonze, és present en àmbits molt diversos de la societat i en, diguéssim, sectors molt contemporanis com el cas del còmic. També és el cas aquest del videoart, com presentem en aquesta pantalla doble. I bé, aquestes distincions entre l'art, entre la religió, a vegades són borroses, com es mostra en aquesta peça d'aquí, on es fa difícil dir si es tracta d'una icona religiosa, d'una pràctica artística. En el cas de Maria Llonze, tots aquests àmbits es troben constantment sobreposats. I no podíem acabar una exposició d'aquestes característiques sense referir-nos a les estampes religioses. Les estampes són aquestes imatges petites que presenten una de les divinitats del culte i que tenen una oració darrere. Les estampes serveixen per tenir protecció i per tenir bona sort. És a partir de les estampes que hem fet aquesta petita instal·lació en el qual veiem les imatges de Maria Llonze i les seves divinitats i alguns miralls en els quals ens podem veure reflectits. Reflectits perquè el culte a Maria Llonze també ens parla de nosaltres, perquè és practicat aquí a Catalunya, però també reflectits perquè aquestes imatges són unes imatges vives en el context ritual, unes imatges no només que nosaltres mirem, sinó també que ens miren a nosaltres.
So the fact that the exhibition had to be organized during the pandemics, in a way, had a positive aspect, is that I established a contact with all my contacts everywhere in the world, all around the world, in Maria Llonze, so that we engaged into a conversation of how to present it, which images was to be made, how we had to, for example, if we had to ask permission to the spirits in order to make this exhibition, if these images that were supposed to be in a ritual context could be into an exhibition, and how, if it was, for example, good that it was public, but if it would be a problem if this exhibition was, I mean, if you had to pay an entrance. So actually I engaged in an online conversation regarding the very production of this exhibition, which went far beyond the technical problems with the museum, but actually we had to do with the heart of the religion itself. And finally, one of the important aspects of this research on Maria Llonze has to do with collaborative website, a participatory website, most especially that I ran between 2016 and 2019, which was the idea that this participatory website allowed believers to send me images of their own altars and rituals, or to comment on images of others. And it was an interesting device, but also so I got images from altars from all over the world, and then there was a chat and people comment on each other's images, and so it was interesting in this idea of a platform that permits, that is creation in the sense that you bring people together. The thing is that it is dangerous as well. It's dangerous in the sense that we don't have to be afraid about conflict. We know that conflict is, I mean, part of human and social life. No, we are anthropologists, we know that. Anyway, when you have to be, when you're in the midst of the conflict, sometimes it's more complicated, in the sense that, well, I received sometimes confront discourses. Not all people, all believers agree in the way that images or rituals should be practiced, and I had to negotiate this concept, which actually was interesting and informative in terms of research, but also personally I couldn't put myself away of that. I mean, it was something that sometimes was heavy to carry on. Is it clear what I'm trying to express? Yeah. So for example, here you see an image. I put some of the images here. This is an image of a tobacco. So this is part of the famous word in this religion. If you want to foresee the future, so they smoke tobacco. Right? Depending on the shape of the ash, they can foresee what's going to happen, or if you have the permission or not. So this research on Maria Leonza is finished. Well, it will never be finished. Actually, you never finish a research; you just abandon it. But and I'm still in contact with most of them, but I consider it in a way closed. And now I'm in the, I'm starting, actually it started 1 year ago and I can't believe it. And it's quite frightening anyway, which is this ERC project called Visual Trust. So Visual Trust, Reliability, Accountability, and Forgery in Religious, Scientific, and Social Images. And this idea of the visual trust started with the allegedly loss of evidence of images, especially photographic ones. No? The idea that, okay, the fault is everywhere, there is manipulation, there is deep fakes, there is, you can't be sure when you see an image if it's true or false, whatever. There is this discourse among some theoreticians, but then if you look at practices, and we like practices as anthropologists, we constantly do things with and through images, and we adopt different ethical stances towards images. Imagine that you go to a doctor, no, and the doctor says, okay, I've made an image of, your lungs, and here is the image. You look at this is not good. It's something, in this sense, the very moment in which the doctor is pointing to the image, this is a moment in which this image gets what we call an intensification process. And then, so in a way, you trust this image. Trusting has to do with being confident with, and to undertake actions through the relationship with this image. So the idea of the visual trust is in a study in which we analyze ethnographically and using experimental methods how people from different places and social domains interact with and through images in terms of trust and mistrust. So why people trust some images and not others for knowing the world and communicating with others? You go into a website, you see a rock is going to crash with the earth and it's going to be destroyed in a couple of days. We see this kind of spam all the days, no? And we don't trust it. We say, okay, it mustn't, it can't be true. But if you see the same photograph in a conference at the university explained by a physician, well, it's quite frightening. Okay, so the idea of the context, the idea of the network of relationships in which images are embedded, are important to understand the kind of relationships and the expectations that we establish with images. So this is very rapidly I should be finishing probably. Okay, no. Yes, I should, but anyway, it won't be long. The aims of this project, which will lead to, again, films, exhibitions, articles, books, and I'm showing to you how the website is designed as well. So the project includes a research team composed by 3 postdocs and 2 PhD candidates. We actually have right now 2 PhD candidates and 1 postdoc, and yesterday we had the interviews of the 2 postdoc positions. So the decision has been made, but I can't say a word. So this is the research team, and so we are at the very beginning. So this is, now we could say, provisory results. So you see that in a way the website follows the ideas that I have explained about eclectic assemblage, the intensive approach to the category of results and nomology, because we have a section called ongoing research, another one is called events and news, and then there is content. So an anthropology of the visual forgery, an anthropology of visual deception, an anthropology of the fake. This is so there is this idea of studying images through images. So researchers use different visual methodologies, and which is part of the multimodal approaches, is the idea of combining different methods, different ideas, and bringing them together and see what happens. instead of applying a method in singular, a unique one. So, for example, we use drawing, we may use artificial intelligence, different aspects that are being used in the project right now. So we have a section that I'm going to show you, which is called ongoing research, knowledge in the making. And it has to do with these partial or unfinished works. Of course, we are not going to unveil everything we do, but I think that this idea of that the research is not a black box till the end, that we upload initial provisory tentative attempts that perhaps are not going to lead in a very particular or concrete way, but that are a kind of open conversation, especially with the people with whom we are working. For example, we are doing a lot of research, and this is part of the task of one of the PhD students, with documentaries, filmmakers, people working in photojournalism. So this is the kind of people that we are doing field work with. And so we have them commenting on how they work, how they consider their own, how they make images, how they signify images. And so we have a lot of pieces of this. And the fact of, and these guys are always traveling. And so when we upload this provisory result, it permits us to have a kind of transparency, but also to engage into a conversation. And I think that this idea of sparking a conversation, a point of encounter, is much of the multimodal sensitivity. We also put events and news, so the things that we are doing. And so this is a section of the ongoing research, which is perhaps the most interesting one, and which is still in construction, because all this takes time. This is the thing, that you have to do this as well, and then you have to do, writing articles and making films and this sort of stuff. But here we upload research videos, photographic essays, the interviews that we do. Now this is not still online, but we have a lot of interviews with the scholars, with people. Some of them are filmed, and then we upload them in a reduced version with English subtitles. Some of them are Spanish, Catalan, French. And so we make them available because I think that the multimodal sensitivity has to do a lot also with the idea of a public science. Text, for example, some field notes, some thoughts, some things. And here, then you can you may have different ways of searching for specific kind of images, but as the main idea of the project is that the distinction between social, scientific, or religions makes no sense. It's also a distinction made to be dissolved. Then there is also this idea of intersectionality. And so you have this browser permits you to focus on a specific search. So the idea is that the research advances, and that some results are put into this website, which finally will become, hopefully, a kind of exhibition in itself, a kind of curation, in the sense that it's something that it's being it's an eclectic assemblage, again, of ideas, thoughts, and different ways of writing and representing, and of course of imagining. And then there's this section of events and news, where we are uploading what we're doing when we go to a congress, when we do filming, when we participate. Here we have the contact of this project, this team that we have right now. So this is there are a couple of papers as well, if you're interested, that I'm going also to send to the conveners of this session, about the concept of visual trust, that was published in Anthrovision. This is a kind of explaining what I do understand, or what I propose to understand for this concept. Actually, by the end of the project, perhaps I will think something different, but this is research. And then a specific concept, that a specific research case that was just published in open access, about the role of fake images in the Russia-Ukrainian war, and that is already online, and that presents more or less the theoretical framework of the project. Because we are at the very beginning, we are filming right now. We are doing field work, just starting to edit these experimental pieces, in which the idea of collaboration again is important. And perhaps the question is, how are you going to introduce all this? Of course, so for example, I mean, we have different methodologies of engaging with people in terms of drawing, or perhaps in terms of editing as well. So we are experimenting with all this, and this will be presented in the website. So to conclude, I hope I have been clear in explaining a drive and motivation that connects these two researchers, one about Afro-American religions, the other one about fake images, and the idea of visual deception and visual accountability. This connection is based on three main concepts, which are eclectic assemblage, the idea of outcome as a provisory category, as an intensive category, as a promise in a way, and then this idea of homology and experimentation. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I think I was perhaps too long. I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much again. And I'm ready for any conversation that you may have in the future.